Welcome to the Academy of Esports podcast. I'm your host, James O'Hagan. I have the pleasure to bring in one of my co-hosts today from the Thursday night Esports EDU chats, Danielle Johnson. Thank you so much for being on the Academy of Esports podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
It seems we're talking all the time now. Thursday nights have gone off really well. I know for a couple of weeks, though, you've been off getting ready for school. You have quite a number of different hats that you wear, I guess, in your professional career when it comes to not just education, but in esports, because as an educator, you're with the Carrollton-Famers Brand ISD near Dallas, Texas, and you are a CTE and Spanish teacher for middle school students. God bless you for working with the middle schoolers. I'm a elementary teacher by trade, and middle schoolers are kind of like, to me a little bit. But you also are involved with TexSEF, and we interviewed you and Patrick and Greg before when we were at TCEA. Gosh, when was TCEA? Feels like
10 years ago.
It was 10 years ago, right?
10 years ago in February of 2020.
Was it in February that we were there?
Yeah, doesn't it feel like a decade?
It does, because that's
a lot has happened since then.
A few things, yes. It's so funny that we were in Austin in February, and it was like we knew that this virus thing was coming, or it was out there, but we didn't really know if it was actually going to get here or what the impact was going to be. Boy, have we found out. But in that time, from when we last talked in February, TexSEF was announced to be launched in February at TCEA. In fact, my first memory of you and Greg and Patrick was sitting near the front row of the presentation that I was giving, and all of a sudden you're handing out stickers during my presentation. And I'm like, who are these people? And then it was like, oh yes, this is Danielle and Greg and Patrick. But since then, TexSEF has grown up. It has officially launched. You had your official launch party last Thursday night on Twitch. And your role there is a very unique role, Director of Operations and other duties assigned, or anything non-game focused. How do you have an esports organization that you have a role that is non-game focused? What is your role like?
So I do all the paperwork. That's really my job. So, and just like at school, other duties is assigned, those other jobs that need someone to make them function, but no one necessarily really wants to do, that's what I do. So in an organization, just like in a school, everybody has a different role, and businesses, aren't run by the people that are the greatest at doing the thing. You have to have a business person, not that I am by any stretch, but you have to have somebody that's dedicated to that. And just like we want our students to know that there are diverse careers in gaming and esports, I'm kind of proof of it, because I'm not really a gamer. I do like video games, but I'm not competitive really. Okay. So, but I knew that this needed to exist for our students, and knew that I could play a part in it, even if I'm not a gamer.
Well, and that's a really key thing to bring up, because again, in many episodes that I've talked about in the past, people are so worried that they're not gaming as experts. And while I say do not rush to implement your esports program, there does need to be those champions, those people who are brave enough to step into the space. And it sounds like you, being a non-gamer who is stepping into this space, you are one of the brave. You are one of the ones who are trailblazing. But with that said, I also love seeing how TexSEF has organized, because one of the issues that we have in esports, Scholastic esports in particular, in schools, is there are issues related to diversity of people. And I mean by gender and by race and even age demographics. It always seems to be focused in one area. TexSEF has a very unique, board, if you will, that is to esports. Can you talk about some of your board members that you have currently?
So, being representative of Texas in not just our league, but in our leadership was important to us from the very beginning. And at the start, we were sort of two organizations kind of operating in different parts of the state, and we eventually merged. But even when I was talking to, the other group at the time, and we were talking about what we were working on, I asked straight up, I was like, I can't work with an organization that isn't representative of Texas. Can tell me about your board. And she was like, oh yeah, same thing. So our board is 9 people. So there's 5 men and 4 women. And we span the gamut of ethnicities that are representative in Texas. We would like a little bit more representation from our Asian and South Asian communities because I know that they're active in esports, but as we grow, I know that we'll see that. So our board, I actually have to think about it because I know that it's so diverse. It's just we have Black women, Black men, white women, white men, Hispanic, and that's what we want. And we plan on celebrating Texas diversity in our organization. We plan on having shoutcasting as part of our competition. And in the same way that one act and modern oratory and things like that are academic competitions, but we want to do that in both English and Spanish because more than 30% of our state speak Spanish as their first language. And that's something that we celebrate in Texas is our bilingualism.
That's really interesting you bring that up because, again, as even looking at my own community where we do have a number of English language learners in the community, even our conversation just now, as you were talking about, hey, we need to make sure that we have shoutcasting that is in dual languages. I think of the El Paso Honey Badgers, the collegiate team that, again, is primarily Hispanic, primarily female. And they've really done some really interesting and great things. It sounds like you're extending that not just to the high school, but is TexSEF also looking at it from a middle school perspective as well?
So from the beginning, when this was just an idea in my head, and it was an idea in several people's heads, and we got together and it grew. So I'm not trying to take claim for this. In my head, we were starting it we needed to start in middle school because that's where we kind of win or lose students in that connection to school battle is in middle school. It's also where synaptic pruning starts to take place and that change from concrete to abstract to formal development, that Piaget and cognitive change happens around age 12, which is for most kids 6th or 7th grade. And that's when the brain actually starts to, if you don't use it, you lose it. So younger kids have orders of magnitude more brain connections than adults do. And around age 12, the ones that are unnecessary and unused start to get pruned back. So the habits you develop in middle school become your habits for the rest of your life unless you later in life really seek to deliberately change them. And we've all been middle schoolers. We know that they can be weird and silly and cross that line. But we know that when we give them opportunity with a little bit of structure, that they'll blow our minds. And so that desire to build a better gaming culture and a better gaming community that's more inclusive, for me, it had to start in middle school because that's where the habits you leave middle school with are your habits. So that's why it needed to be there.
And that's a very different approach, obviously, than except for maybe Garden State a little bit, because I know Garden State was started by 2 people who were middle school teachers. It's always been high school, or at least to this point, it's been, I shouldn't say always, it's to this point has been high school focused. Obviously, again, you are setting a different trajectory here with middle school students. And I think that,
it's been money focused before, not student focused.
Right.
That's really it. The money is with the older kids.
Well, it's not even money. It's the model that a lot of us had to go on has always been, and I hate to say it, but it has been the pros. The games that we've been starting with early have been driven by the pro scene. And what I have seen come out of COVID, and while we know for a fact that esports is not COVID proof, I think we've started to see an evolution of what esports is and kind of a blurring of the lines between competitive esports and casual gaming. And right now finding opportunities for kids to play in all different arenas, whether it's mobile or PC or console specific even, but just trying right now to find ways to engage kids, I think has been something that has come out of this COVID age. And again, looking at how do we do this from elementary all the way up? Because again, we know that kids are playing in these unique spaces right now. Are you seeing the kind of the same in your state?
Yeah. One of the things that really surprised me starting school virtually, because I've finished 2 weeks teaching virtually now. And first, that's been a wild ride. I've been out of the classroom for a while as a technology instructional coach for teachers. So this is the first time I've actually gotten to use all these things that I've learned in the classroom. So I have my lab back, basically. But they're so happy to be in school, even if they're not at school. They show up early to the meets. They want them every day.
Oh, you mean by remote meeting? You mean right by
Yeah.
Zoom or Google Meet or whatever it is?
So
Okay.
happy to be in class with their friends, even if it's over the computer. They are so happy to do the work. They show up early and they don't want to get off. And so that shows me again that they are so desperate for something to do and structure and connection. And this is something we can do remotely. The gaming community was kind of built remotely, you know. The closest you could really get was having like LAN parties and everybody hauling their entire rig, which were not today's setups by any stretch, but hauling it, you know, from house to house. But as the internet has grown and gotten faster and gotten more accessible, you hear stories all the time of people that it's their team, but they've never met them in real life. And I love seeing pictures online of groups that have finally gotten together in real life after, you know, 10 years of playing together online. And that's what it kind of feels like with TexSEF too. I've never met most of these people in real life, but I talk to them almost every day. And
it's fun. That was exactly when we were a couple weeks ago. Chris Fryer was talking about on the Esports EDU chat when we had him on, talking about how he has this whole gaming community of people who until recently he hadn't met. And he, as you were just saying, had been there for years. Yeah.
So that broader community is something that we've never really been able to, you know, as enrichment or as an add-on to give our students. A teacher had to be very deliberate about creating a global personal network or helping students create their own personal network. And I feel like having your virtual interactions, your personal interactions be virtual is so much going to be the norm for our kids that broadening their horizons through gaming and connecting them to other people through gaming is just going to be incredible. Like they're so excited to be in school, have structure, connect with other people. And then we as educators have an unprecedented, and I hate to use that word, it's like freaking COVID bingo.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
I mean, we have buzzwords that we're not allowed to say. But we have an unprecedented opportunity to broaden who our students connect with in a way that we've never been able to do before, because like literally they're already connected to us mobily. Why don't I have you come into my class? Like me and another teacher on the other side of the country can swap classes for a day. That's not something that could have existed before. Like we have an unreal, like innovative like genesis of a way of education. And esports really fits into that in a way to connect kids, not just to school, but to each other and to a broader community that they wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet outside of that.
And it's
like literally, you're the only person I know from Wisconsin.
Well,
like
thank you.
I've met one person from Wisconsin in high school. I mean, in college, but like, I mean, and that's our country.
Well, what you also are bringing up too is I think, you know, we as educators who have been doing this for so long, and I know I have had a lot of personal anxiety going into this school year, as I'm sure a lot of educators have, because
it is seeing their faces, it melted.
Well, yes, I get that, but yeah. I think where we're finding our roadblocks in this moment is in our own minds. You know, what you're describing now, the kids are just so happy and that we need to get them connected in these ways. Even my own mindset, I'm starting this year going, man, how are we going to do this if we can't start the year face to face? And I think that's our own personal defect, or I won't call it a defect, but our own foible, if you will, of oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? Because I know how I've done this for 20 years, and it's more of a hey, you just need to find the ways to do it. The kids are happy to accommodate. They're used to, having their own Discords and, setting up their own Zoom chats and setting up their own, most of the kids I know don't want to be on camera, which is interesting, but you're right. Connecting in these ways is very unique, but how is TexSEF? Let's talk specifically about TexSEF and your role there. How are you seeing that playing out in Texas? Again, we talked about the diversity of Texas, and we're not just talking about, Houston, Dallas, Lubbock, El Paso, San Antonio. Can I do the Texas bingo? But we're also talking about the areas like out west, the panhandle areas, the areas that, maybe not are as well connected. How is TexSEF addressing those, potential
We're
connectivity
trying.
issues in any way?
So when we talked about the ethnic and linguistic diversity on our board, we also have geographic diversity. So Matt Tarpley, who is in Merkel ISD and McMurray College, or McMurray University, pardon, that is a rural community. And so whenever we are having discussions, just by his presence, we remember our rural communities. So that's why one of the reasons to include geographic diversity in our leadership is because we need to represent all of Texas, not just the parts that we know. But so we are really trying to make sure that we are including our rural communities. The connectivity issues that they have in rural communities where schools and other public buildings are the only real reliable access points is not something that we as, a small group can really accomplish. Although our state, with the pressure that Dallas ISD has put on our state, has launched something called Operation Connectivity to get high-speed internet to every single student in Texas. And we have, I think Dallas ISD, which is where I live, and it's next door to my district, purchased 60,000 hotspots. So, and they're starting to make more public access to broadband. But our rural communities still have that issue. One of the ways we're trying to connect is when we are having students play at home or at school, but we are going to run a console drive in the fall when the new PlayStation and Xbox come out. We want gamers to donate their old ones so that we can refurbish them and give them to schools to check out to students.
Very
because
cool.
Not only can students play on those, they can actually access Google Classroom and stuff like that from their gaming systems.
They can. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's another access point, and they can at least get on YouTube when we assign videos and things like that. So that's another access point for our kids, because we know sending a gaming rig or a gaming laptop home with every student that wants to play is unfeasible. And if they don't have high speed anyway, that's kind of pointless. But we are doing what we can. We can't tackle statewide infrastructure issues, but we can partner with those who do have that power.
Well, and now let's kind of shift a little bit, because I know too that while TexSEF is trying to partner with and get gaming out across the state, you are trying to build it for the first time in your own school. And you're looking at me like, yes, I am. And
I'm a fraud, guys.
You're not a
I'll own it.
No. See,
No.
there's no fraud here with this, Danielle. And here's why I see it. It's two people, you and Bradford, right? Bradford Harris, who is also with us on the Thursday night Esports EDU chats. You all have been, or I'll just say it Texas-wise, y'all have been studying the topic now for probably a couple of years now, at least a year, maybe 2 years, and really getting your feet wet and understanding the landscape of things. I don't see that as fraud. I see that as truly not rushing to implement. You are taking those steps, and again, finding the ways to do it correctly and not trying to just dive all in and then figure it out later. So let's put that fraud imposter thing completely to the side. But let's talk about where you are right now in your process, because I think for some people, they may also be in this stage as well. They may be in the formative stages. And again, doing it during a pandemic isn't necessarily the easiest way, but How are you starting your process?
Yeah, that silence is a good, reaction. So,
Well, it's very different than starting a state association. I mean,
well, yeah.
I
So
mean,
this was my original intention was to create a program for the 6 middle schools in my district.
okay.
And my district was moving a little bit slower. I was a little bit getting the brush off. After some real high interest rate at first, started getting the brush off. And that's when I met Greg and on Twitter, on the Esports EDU Twitter chat on a Thursday night. That's how we met. It's also how I met Kim, by the way. So we started just collaborating and talking. And so it's weird that I kind of did it backwards, went building a state association before having a team of my own. But I think having the state association makes it much easier to build this team on my own, because before, not just would I be a little bit clueless about what I'm doing, which I'm totally willing to admit, I didn't have anyone to go to. And that is one of the things about TexSEF is we are a community of teachers. We are all educators, all volunteers. We are all employed by independent school districts in Texas. And so we know it. We know the life of a teacher in Texas. We know the rules of Texas. We know how Texas schools work. We know the TEKS. We know what fits in the classroom. We know the law. A lot of our leadership is in district administration. And so they are very familiar with the ways the upper echelons of a school district work. We have, assistant principals and district level leadership or campus level leadership, and then also classroom teachers. And so we know what it's like to be a teacher in Texas. And so whatever you need to make it work for your school, we have the resources. And there's no stupid questions to ask in our Discord. Everybody is super helpful. So that makes it, as a new teacher, there's some place for me to go where the people understand who I am and what I need without having to have that whole background conversation. You can just jump in and start asking questions, because we're all kind of in the same boat.
But what's great about how you started, to me, is how, for states that already have associations set up, that part is done for you. But again, when I was starting in Racine or even starting in Rockford, we didn't really have a state association at the time to go through. We were working with high school Star League, high school Star League, which was a couple of years ago. And a lot of the work that you have done with partners across the state is how I think a lot of school districts should start to tackle as well too. Looking at, hey, what do we want our teams to look like? What games, after we figure out what we want our teams to look like and what our goals are and everything else, being able to set up the structure of what's going to be best for our kids. And you're looking at this from what's going to be best for Texas kids. In your school district, where you said, hey, the middle school was not starting off, giving me the okay to get everything started, shifting to, again, you shift over to TexSEF, you set everything up. So now you could take this and bring this in, and now you've already done the work that a lot of school districts have to do from the front end. So don't call yourself a fraud in any of this. You've actually done the process just on a much grander scale early on. And now it's like you're ready to bring your teams into something that I hope is well supported and well structured throughout the state. And I believe that it is. Again, looking at your launch party.
I hope so too, yeah.
Well, again, looking at the launch party, and we'll link to the Twitch channel and the launch party from Thursday night, that you've started it the right way. I mean, you really have. You have set up an organization that will support your middle school and your high schools throughout the state. And you get a competitive structure and a professionalism structure already in place. What's wrong with starting there?
I mean, it's been a blast. I'm so thankful that it kind of worked out this way, where I get to bring a team into an organization instead of having to find an organization for my team. Because it gives a lot more legitimacy to what we're doing. And I think the experience that the other members have had coaching esports teams at their schools and really listening to what has worked and what hasn't is going to help us a lot. Like, for example, we are only running one game per season. Well, technically two, because we're going to have a PC and a console title each season.
Okay.
But I know that with some other leagues that you can play in, you can play tons of different games all at the same time. Well, we don't want to tell our students no. So every time a student asks for a new game, we know we're going to say yes, and we're going to be there, every single night of the week. So we took that off the table. So that way we kind of laid down the limits so that the teachers and the educators on the ground don't have to, do that research, make that stand, tell this student no. Like, we just went and did it so that we can provide a more supportive structure and more help for you. We're not going to run, 15 games at one time. We're going to run one game at one time. Games are always going to be on Tuesdays. Like, we're going to have a very consistent structure so that, everybody can participate without burning out the educator resource that actually makes things run.
That is absolutely real. I will say that, again, in our state, we have 4 games that we play, 2 and 2 in the fall, 2 in the spring. I have educators who last year were working with students from September all the way through till COVID hit, and we were going to go to the end of March. So you think about that, when I went to go get put in for salaries for all of these people, they went, wow, these salaries are high. I said, hey, the football coach goes from August to November if they're lucky. They're usually done by October. It's like the basketball coach is going from November to February if they're lucky. These people are going 6 months, potentially 7 months, or even longer, depending if they find spring tournaments. I said they need to be compensated as much, because again, how much time they're putting in, they need to be compensated as much as a football coach, basketball coach, volleyball coach, whatever it is. Because
and I'm not going to lie, finding a football coach right now is going to be a hell of a lot easier than finding an esports sponsor.
Right. It is, because this is something, again, people were already kind of scared and nervous about it going into just without COVID, right? Oh, you want me to do that? I don't know anything about there's all those questions of, I don't know this game, or I don't know how this system works, or I'm not an expert. There's a lot of fear with educators who aren't experts in things. But again, as you're saying, it's hard to find it, but because again, we're tacking on COVID, and how do you do this now remotely, and how do you manage this remotely? You're right that it's going to be potentially hard to find those people, but those are the people you want to find, hold, and compensate well. I can't tell you how many, even at the collegiate level, esports coaches there are, especially at the collegiate level, where colleges think that they can pay one person to do all the work. And I'll to the college people who are listening to this, I don't want you to throw your phones down or your computers to the ground. I have 5 high schools and I have 10 general managers, and then myself as the director of the program. And each of my general managers is well paid. So I know that there's probably collegiate people right now who are spiking their devices, what they're listening to, because I know they complain about trying to do everything. With your district experience, again, are you going to be coach, or are you going to be more director of several teams?
I am coaching my middle school team.
Okay.
So I am not, I'm not responsible for the other parts of the program. My district's kind of lagging behind. Implementing,
and nothing wrong with that. Let's clarify that too.
And
a lot of other a lot of other things going on in the world right now that need attention. So lagging behind is okay.
So, but however, like Dallas ISD, like I said, where I live, on Thursday during our launch party, the board voted for a $3 million investment in their esports program.
Very cool.
We are seeing the push and the recognition of the impact that it can have on students and the connection that it can bring to schools. In Texas, Texas is like the center of the gaming world. I know we think Silicon Valley, California, or whatever, but
Los Angeles or
Doom
Milwaukee
was created in Texas,
Not Milwaukee. We are not the center. Sorry.
Texas has been kind of the center of gaming for a long time. Texas has, the only history video game museum. We have several graduate and even doctoral level programs in game studies, and several schools that are creating esports management minors and majors.
Mm-hmm.
So we're very much in the center of this. Texas has over 130 just animation companies that support gaming. And the industry here is huge. We have a huge esports arena in Arlington, and then another one is going in to San Antonio very soon.
I just heard about the one in San Antonio. Yeah.
And then another organization that I know of is putting LAN centers around the country. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. I don't know if I'm allowed to like say who they are. So, they're co-branding with a retail store, and next to all of these retail stores, which are around Texas and around the country, will be a LAN center.
Is it Five Below?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that like knowledge? I don't know.
So Nerd Street's partnership with Five Below. Yeah. That's public knowledge. You can say that.
Okay. I can't remember what is it anymore.
Let's put it this way. Guess what? Nerd Street is partnering with Five Below to put in LAN centers all across the United States. Danielle did not leak that. I did, if it wasn't already known. There we go.
So, I mean, like, Texas is kind of it. And I mean, South by Southwest has their esports conference. And so having this for our schools is incredibly important because we have an industry to support. Mm-hmm. And as jaded as it sounds as a teacher, that's literally what we're making. We're making future employees and employers. But we want them to be responsible, good human beings, you know, when they create and when they work and when they employ people. So we're helping develop an industry at the ground level, which I think is incredible because we're starting with like 11-year-olds that will hopefully one day be working in this industry. And we're starting it in a way that is equitable, hopefully from the very beginning. So something UIL, University Interscholastic League, is the governing body for competition in Texas for public schools. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that is not super common knowledge is that's actually a department at UT. It's not anything related to the state. And it is entirely separate from our education organization. It is a department at UT. UIL employees are UT employees. That's why it's University Interscholastic.
University of Texas.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
So A&M used to actually run, or Prairie View A&M used to run a separate interscholastic league because UIL was segregated. So,
and Prairie View A&M is a historically black
college university in Texas that is now part of the A&M system. And you can't take something that was started divisively and under racist pretext and like racist foundations. You can't take that and just change it and make it something equitable. You have to tear it down and start over. In a lot of ways,
yeah. I mean, even as we're looking now across our communities, even I know where I grew up, San Mateo, California, shocked. Really, I was honestly shocked to see the amount of redlining that went on in my community that I grew up in a New York Times article by a developer who was a competitor actually to my grandfather. And my grandfather was not one to write redlining code into his deeds, but that his rival was. And it was just kind of stunning for me to see it. And as you're talking about, even some of these communities where redlining still is on the deeds, they're making active efforts to have that all, even though legally they're not enforceable, to even have them just removed because of the historical context behind them. Yeah.
And UIL is celebrating its 100 years today, or this year. And there's like UIL 100-year stickers. That's fantastic that you have had an organization that, you know, has brought scholastic competition to schools, but you started off as a segregated organization, you know, desegregating and by default dissolving the program that was designed for students of color. You don't absorb it. You just desegregate it and there's dissolved. So it's not like even desegregating made you equitable because desegregating was forced upon it, not a choice.
And as you said, the association that Prairie View A&M had was dissolved, correct? So what you're saying is
it's a little bit like Brown v. Board, where schools integrated, but teachers really didn't. All teachers of color and administrators of color basically lost their jobs, and that's why we have had a scarcity of teachers of color, since Brown v. Board.
Right. Well, with, again, we're not, unfortunately, I'm glad that you're sharing all this, because I think it shows, again, that you started TexSEF. We're coming back to TexSEF, the large organization. Yeah. You started TexSEF with the idea of not being necessarily partners with the UIL. You started it with diversity, inclusion, and equity of access as core pillars of your organization, as shown in the leadership of your organization. And again, you may think of yourself as a pretender, and you're not. Don't go through this imposter syndrome stuff with me. You guys have all done the work that a lot of school districts come looking for after the fact, not before. And so I think as you prepare to go down your path with your middle school teams, what I'm seeing is that you already have those key pillars from TexSEF already ingrained into what you're going to have your program be. Because again, as I've said before in my presentations, we become responsible forever for what we obtained. Again, taking that from the story, The Little Prince. If you start off with an organization that is just, hey, I'm just going to start an esports team and all the boys show up and they're all white boys and they all want to play Rocket League, it's great for them. But what about the kids who have other...
Who's missing?
Who's missing? Exactly. Is it a is your team a cross section of your school? Ours, we are not there yet. I know we are using these couple of months because our Wisconsin Association decided not to start until November, that we are going to use these first 2 months to do some very casual gameplay first. We're having, each high school is going to have their own game nights, and we're not doing anything fancy other than Battlefy and using Google Classroom as the spot where everybody comes in to sign up and participate.
So are we, yeah.
But we're using this as an opportunity, again, find out what games are out there that kids really enjoy to play, mixing up the consoles, mixing up the PCs, mixing up mobile, and just giving kids an opportunity to play right now. Because there has been, as you were talking about earlier, these kids are so happy to just see each other on a Zoom call. I think our kids are going to be
put into breakout rooms and stay on calls while they're doing their work.
Yeah, they want to have these kind of experiences. Yeah, they want to have these experiences. So I know we're going to use it as a way to get us jump starting in our esports for the fall season, which will be in November, and our spring season. And again, give us an opportunity to try some things out. And for those of you who may think like, oh, that's esports, I want to clarify what we're doing is more of a casual game experience. So these are more like gaming clubs, gaming nights. This isn't organized competitive to the degree of what we want to set for esports. So just keep that in mind too.
There's a book I love called Once a Runner, and it's about...
I hate running. Go on.
So do I. But I was a runner for a while. Not a very good one or a very fast one, but I was one. And in the novel, he's a college athlete. Mm-hmm. And he brings his girlfriend to the track and field, field house. And inside, they're having like a mini Olympics with the track team. And they're, pretending to run track. If they're track athletes, this is what they do all day. This is the thing they complain about and the thing they love. But when they have free playtime, they created their own rules and created their own Olympics. And the girlfriend asks, he's like, what are they doing? He said, they're playing track. Like, what do our kids do when they want to pretend? They play school and they play house. The play aspect of imitating something much grander is how you work out the kinks in your social interaction in that space. And so casual gaming clubs as a precursor or something standalone or something as part of your competitive league is beyond vital. Mm-hmm. Esports aren't the only video games. Esports is a subset of the video game industry. So not taking the opportunity that we have by having our students in esports and connected to each other and to us, we basically have a captive audience to introduce them to a whole industry. Why would we limit it to a small subset? That's damn near criminal for an educator. Yeah.
And my daughter, I know my middle daughter, she wants to make a competitive Minesweeper a thing. She's...
Heck yeah, I'll play that.
Yeah. So if you're thinking like, how do you if you're a teacher right now who's in a school going, I don't know how to do any of this, I don't know how to get started.
Let your kids just do something.
Have
and
your
they
kids
make
pick
up a
the games
game.
and let them think it up. Again, my daughter said, "Hey, let's do competitive Minesweeper where it's all just speed runs because everything is randomized in the game." So you set up your giant, as big as you can Minesweeper map, and you speed run it. And if you complete it, you post your time. That's it. And if
nobody would have thought in a million years that Rubik's Cubes would be a huge competition.
still is, and it was the fad of the 80s, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
If you give kids like 30 minutes and a couple of things, they will make a game and a competition out of it.
Yeah.
And that's just the nature of what they do. If you ever have let kids have free time in PE or athletics, you'll see the first thing they do, they get the balls out, but they make up their own rules to the game.
Yep.
And make up their own versions of it. And that's exactly what we want them to do because they're going to be the ones that create the next titles in the next industry. So I don't play combative games and competitive games, but I love story-based games. And for example, What Remains of Edith Finch is an entirely immersive story-based game that it's not competitive. There's no fighting. There's no tricks. There's nothing to it. You're just going through a story. You are so emotionally immersed in this story that you feel everything that your character feels as you go through it. And it's beautifully done and beautifully told. And like, it's a masterpiece, but it's not an esport by any stretch. But those still need to be
considered, or find a way to possibly consider it at least, or as part of your program. I mean, for me, it was that what you described for me is Undertale. Even though Undertale does have a fighting system that you can use, you don't have to. But yeah, telling the story and the characters, and even though it's written in this 16-bit style, it still is, again, one of the most fabulous games I've ever played in my entire life. So I get what you're saying exactly. And even, again, finding ways to play asynchronously, speed runs being one of them, or Minecraft competitive builds like the Minecraft Masters tournament that NASEF ran this summer, which, by the way, of course, TexSEF is also
even Fortnite competitive,
And again, TexSEF being an affiliate of NASEF, Wisconsin High School Esports Association being one, but my own school district, I got it in early. I got my affiliate status way early because I had 5 high schools in Racine. So we're our own separate affiliate right now. But it's, again, being able to do the things that we want to do that meet our needs, that are going to help us move things forward. And Danielle, I see and hear that while Texas has their way of doing things in Wisconsin, and we have our way of doing things, there's a lot of commonalities, a lot of ways that we can work together, and I think we have been. And I really am interested in keeping up with how your, this birthing process, if you will, of the team that you have. Well, there's no other way to describe it.
Yeah. So we're going to have our first team meeting, not this coming week, but the next week.
Okay.
League play for TexSEF starts the first week in October. Schools that chose to push their start date back start September 8th. And that gave schools, 3 weeks or so to kind of feel out if they want to participate in the fall league. If not, they can sign up for the spring league.
Okay.
But yeah, so we're going to get it going and see what happens. And I'm really hoping that I teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade this year. So I at least I have a diverse cross section of my school. So I'm hoping I get a diverse, a wide variety of age ranges. I've had a lot of girls very interested, which I am so excited about. But yeah, we'll see who shows up to the first meeting and who wants to stay after that.
Well, and again, we can also, those of you who do not know about this, you can find on the Academy of Esports Twitch page on Thursday nights the Esports EDU chat, where Danielle is usually there, except for the last couple of weeks, because again, things have been a little
stressful. Sorry guys, school started.
Yeah, you had school start. And but it's usually me, and we try to keep it a very diverse group of people across esports as well, where you can see us sharing about topics of the day. I'm sure, Danielle, I can always ask you questions, but we'll make sure to do a follow-up episode here in a couple of months to give you an opportunity to kind of share what's happened along the way. So if you have things that you need to write down, remember, stuff like that, we'll make sure to save that for a future podcast episode.
I'll try to document it as well as I can.
Sounds great. Danielle Johnson, thank you so much for being a guest on the Academy of Esports podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
That will do it for this week on the Academy of Esports. I've been your host, James O'Hagan. Esports are organized competitive video games allowing schools to redefine their athletic culture, diversify opportunities for student participation, promote good physical and mental health, increase collegiate scholarship pathways, and play games. We can never forget the importance of play. The mission of the Academy of Esports is to support these ideals. The vision of the Academy of Esports is for all students to experience the fun and joy of playing competitive video games. You may follow me on Twitter at Jim O'Hagan. That's at JIMOHAGAN, and through the Academy of Esports account at TAO Esports. It's a great way to get the latest blog posts, podcast episodes, and news coming out of esports and education. And remember, you can continue your engagement by going to www.taoesports.com. You can also connect through Facebook at www.facebook.com/TAOesports. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to our time again next week.